This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joire.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joire, and today is Thursday, January 23rd, 2020, and my guest is Matthew Moniz. Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for being my guest. You made a couple of videos that are very timely because we've had a lot of leaks and rumors. Last week, we talked with my guest about all the leaks and rumors, like Galaxy S20 leaks and rumors, but there's been more P40 Huawei rumors, P40 Pro specifically, and OnePlus rumors, OnePlus 8 Pro specifically. What are you more passionate about right now? What's getting you more tickled?
Okay, me personally, it's going to be OnePlus just because you could actually buy the phone in most places in the world. And that's not like a shot at Huawei. It's just because they have Google Play services.
No, I agree 100%. And actually, I have something to tell my listeners and you about. I have a Mate 30 Pro and I have GMS on it, so we'll get back to that.
Okay, but the OnePlus 8 Pro specifically is because there's a lot of good rumors coming to the device. Like we hear that they're finally going to bring water resistance, which is something that's been missing for a long time.
You mean officially? Because I feel like since the 7 Pro, they've had these gaskets on the SIM slots. And I mean, we think it's pretty water resistant already, right?
Yeah, we do. And I think like the only two specific phones they kind of like under the table said these are water resistant. I think it was the 7 Pro and I think it was the one previous to that. But like to have an official IP rating is probably going to make a lot of people happy, especially if they're like playing in the big leagues with other flagship smartphones. They have to have that.
I agree 100%. So that's the one thing. What else are you excited about?
Wireless charging. I think this is it. I think they're finally going to put wireless charging on the 8 Pro.
And you think it's going to be how many watts?
I mean, their whole idea of holding off on it was to wait until the technology matured that wireless charging was fast enough to maybe not be as fast enough as their warp charge, but I think it's going to be at least 10 watts.
Yeah, well, that'd be a minimum because I always was on the impression that the reason OnePlus didn't do wireless charging was they were waiting for like 20 to 30 watt wireless charging to be pretty prevalent or to have some sort of internal, you know what I mean by internal, like the BBK group, Oppo, Vivo, OnePlus, or rather more Oppo, OnePlus developing their own, like they did with the VOOC stuff for Oppo, which is compatible and identical to the quick charging that OnePlus is using, which I never know the name of anymore ever since they changed the name. It used to be Dash, I think, and I don't know what it is now.
I think it's warp charge. I think that's what
Warp?
it is.
Yeah,
warp.
It used to be Dash, now it's Warp. See, I never remember which is which. Anyway.
Just remember Dash Charge is the reason why they had to change it because of the whole Amazon debacle. I think they had a name that was very similar to it.
That's right.
Yeah.
You nailed it. So I'm thinking they're only going to roll it out this time because they finally have something like 20 watt. More than the 15, which is kind of the typical maximum we've seen on Samsung devices and iPhones, etc. You remember that Huawei has now 27 watt wireless charging on, I think it's 27 on the Mate 30 Pro.
Yep.
And proprietary though, I think. And then Xiaomi's been the leader there. I think they have 30 watt. And I might be swapping the two here. It might be Huawei has 30 and Xiaomi has 27. But those are the currently king of the hill, as it were.
Yeah. But even so, like, you know, for me personally, and I think most people, like, I don't think they'll care if it's 27 watt. I think they just want wireless charging. Like when I go to bed at night, I have a wireless charging stand. I put my phone there. It tells me the time. You know, it's just convenient.
It's so convenient.
Right?
Yeah, I charge my Pixels wirelessly at night, and the OnePlus has been. I use it as I use the 7T Pro 5G McLaren, you know, on T-Mobile here.
Yep.
And I couldn't wireless charge it at night. It was a big thorn on my side. I didn't really realize how big of a deal it was because I've had Pixels for so long. And iPhones, right? So,
yeah. I mean, that's like the only reason I use two phones, like most of us tech enthusiasts do. And like my Android phone is a Pixel just because the OnePlus doesn't have wireless charging. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's the only reason.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about that. I think that killer combo of having an Android phone and an iPhone, right? Like, as a creator, I mean, I do videos, YouTube, like you. You obviously you're much more popular than I am, but I'm sure you use your iPhone for B-roll all the time, right?
Sometimes. I mean, like, if I'm going to rely on a phone for video, it's going to be the iPhone.
Right, like if you're at a trade show or like you're like casually doing something and you want to put it in your video, that's going to be a pretty good go-to, right?
Yeah, and on top of that, like even like so, for example, I didn't have my camera on me the other time, and I was with my videographer, and he didn't have the camera on him. We're just like hanging out at an event. We didn't plan to film or anything, but there was something cool there. So I was like, you know what? You have an iPhone. I have an iPhone. You give me your phone,
Your content, yeah.
your phone to like record as a microphone, and then use my iPhone to record me. And it ended up turning out like really good for a phone. You know,
I mean, it's surprising and it's getting better all the time. I finally bought an iPhone 11 because, I'm not usually, Apple doesn't give me devices, and I'm a bit of a snob, having been a journalist for as long as I have written for as many, pretty famous publications like Engadget. I just expect people to send me stuff. And so I buy iPhones when it's significant. And of course, the 11 has been a very significant iPhone. I think the 11 family, I should say. And I finally decided to buy the cheapest 11, the entry level of 64, because I generally offload stuff off of the device very often, and I don't record at 4K. So it's perfect for me. And it's really changed my life. Like at CES, I was able to make some much higher quality content because of it. Because Android phones in general, I mean, unless you're using Galaxy phone, video recording is always a little on the mess side, right?
I agree. I mean, like, it's getting better, but I still think there's a gap between what the iPhone can do and most Android devices can do. And I think you made the great choice. Like, if you're just using it for video and for floor coverage.
Yeah, video and ultra-wide angle photography, since my Pixel 4 XL does not have an ultra-wide. It's kind of the best of both worlds, right? For photos, I get the telephoto and the super zoom from Google. I get all the awesome goodness from the Google main camera, like including things like night sight. And then I still have the awesome main camera from the iPhone that's also really solid. And then I have the ultra-wide from the iPhone, which is missing on the Pixel. And then video recording from the iPhone, which, as you know, sucks on the Pixel, right?
Exactly. Even like Instagram stories is better on the iPhone too.
Oh my God.
Right?
Like posting anything to Instagram from the iPhone. It's just so much. I just feel it bugs me because, I just grab whatever phone is in my pocket, and, I usually have a third and a fourth or whatever for review purposes. I grab whatever phone is in my pocket and I post to Instagram. And then now I'm like, oh, where's my iPhone? It's just like, God damn it. Anyway, back to the OnePlus.
Yes.
Wireless charging. See, we just did a tangent. It was great.
It was a good tangent.
OnePlus, so wireless charging and water resistant. What else do we know? We know it has a hole punch.
Yes.
Left hole front. So no mechanical cameras, which probably will help with the water resistance issue.
Yeah. I mean, how do you feel about that? Like, I know from a durability standpoint, it'll make a difference. I know from like a similarity standpoint, if they're like rumored to be releasing 3 or 4 devices next year, they'll probably have like a cohesive design language. But I feel like that was kind of part of the OnePlus character of last year, like having that differential compared to most of the stuff that was out there.
So I'm torn because on one hand, I like the no distraction, no hole, no notch display. And that's, I think, what we're going to lose. And I think it's going to be a tough marketing exercise for them to sell this hole punch on to an audience that had before that a fully unaffected by any protrusions display. So let's see how they market that. I can live with it. I don't mind. I think that the mechanical issues that potentially can arise from having that pop-up camera are definitely something to be concerned about long term. And we'll see the difficulty in doing a proper water resistance setup with that. So I'm on board, but I feel like I was expecting more. See, what I was expecting was the 8 non-Pro and the 8 Lite to have the hole punch. And then I was expecting the 8 Pro to have the under-display camera that Oppo just showed us.
Oh, that would be so sweet.
That's what we want. That's what we need. That's if OnePlus wants to be, driving innovation hard like they often have, especially, kind of like singing off like a jazz concert, like a jazz musician does off of their Oppo counterpart, they should bring that to being. And I think we might see that on the AT series. Because I don't think it's going to be much longer before we see an actual non-concept that has under-display camera at this point.
Yeah, I mean, who brought it out first? It was Xiaomi, right? Like about a year ago?
They've been concept. The latest concept was from, I think, Oppo or Vivo back in just after we all went to Qualcomm, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So like early December, and then now, I mean, there's strong rumors that Oppo's Find X2 is going to have an under-display camera, and it's going to be launched at MWC. And
Really?
we'll circle back on that. There's some other Find X2 rumors. Well, I mean, the Find X has always been kind of like the concept phone come to life, right? So this is the second gen of it. Remember, the original Find X had that motorized, the whole back slid up. You remember?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it was totally dope. And at the time, that's 2 years ago, right? So, so obviously now the time is ripe for an on-display camera. I think that's possibly what we're going to see from Oppo, but I would have expected OnePlus to just surprise us with that. But again, they're keeping the cost down. I'm sure the Find X2 is going to be very expensive.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, look, I'm gung-ho. I love OnePlus. And if they can add the two things that are officially missing today, which is wireless charging and water resistance, I'm happy. But I do also want them to improve their cameras. The 7T was a big leap forward. The 7T Pro, the 7 Pro as well. The 7 Pro, 7T, and 7T Pro were all much better, hardware in terms of camera, in terms of imaging. But I felt that it still wasn't competitive with the bigger player in the field.
Well, I mean, like that's always been the case with OnePlus. Like, you know, they usually.
But they eventually need to catch up. Look, there was a time when the other people weren't that good either. Apple, it took a little while to catch up, but they're caught up now.
Oh, absolutely. But the camera's always been like their Achilles heel, you know, like it just, it's still not there. I think they need to spend more money because I mean, they're using the same sensors. I think it just comes down to
Software,
computational photography. Yeah, exactly.
Implementation. Yeah. I feel that my biggest bummer was the 7T last year for me was my favorite because it was smaller in the hand. It didn't have the waterfall, curved edge display, and it just was affordable and very highly recommendable. But the telephoto didn't have OIS. It's like if any of the three lenses have to have OIS more than anything else, it's the telephoto. Like what the hell? But the 7T Pro and the 7 Pro, the Pro ones, had the OIS on the telephoto.
Right.
So I feel like they sometimes cheapen out in the weirdest of ways. You know what I'm saying?
I know.
Especially if your camera is already a little on the iffy side because your software is not quite up to par. That's not where you save money on hardware, right? Like,
I agree.
Throw all the beans at it and then go for maybe you can cut the corners somewhere else. I don't know. Maybe that's what they're doing the whole bunch. So maybe I shouldn't be so harsh.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Like, I think at the end of the day, as long as we get those features that we talked about, the wireless charging, the water resistance, etc., I think people will not care so much about the whole punch.
No. How do you feel about the 120 hertz display?
So I think it's great that we're pushing the technology forward. I just don't think we need it right now, just especially because of battery technology. I mean, even OnePlus knows it's going to like drain the battery. Therefore, they're giving you the option to switch between 60, 90, and 120. And let's be honest, like they're not going to stick a 6,000 milliamp battery in this phone.
No.
This is not a gaming device. So they're going to probably put a 4,000 milliamp battery, maybe 4,100 if we get lucky. And if you were to leave 120 hertz on a QHD display, then it's just going to suck the battery. Like even Samsung knows, like if you leave 120 hertz on QHD, it's just going to kill it. That's why rumored only allow you to use it at full HD.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like 120 it's a battle, right? It's a war right now. It's a spec war. And remember that one of OnePlus's biggest market is India.
Yep.
And specs are super high there. A lot of my listeners and actually are listening from India. A lot of my small YouTube channel I have, I say that because yours is so massively awesome. My small YouTube channel has a lot of audience from India as well. And I know that they really care about specs. And I mean, I don't really necessarily agree and understand, but I feel that if that's what your market wants. So I think that's the problem, right? I personally think 90 hertz is good enough. Yeah. And I would be happy with that. And probably I will be running my OnePlus 8, whatever version I have, at 90 hertz because I pegged my Pixel 4 at 90 hertz. And yes, I have maybe a bit of a battery hit, but honestly, it's so much better pegged at 90 hertz and constantly changing. And I see it when it changes. It drives me nuts. Yeah. So my 120, I'm not a gamer really on mobile, so I don't really care. So I mean, I get that, if you look at a 300 hertz monitor side by side with like a 144 hertz or something, you can actually see the difference, especially on scrolling text. Like,
oh, for sure.
It's kind of amazing. I didn't think 300 hertz would matter, right? I thought past 150 or so, we'd be like, whatever,
I know. Did you see the 360 hertz demo at CES with
that's the
monitor?
One. I was thinking not 300, 360 yet.
That was crazy. Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah,
but
crazy stuff.
But my guess is they're going to release this phone. They're going to leave it on, let's say, 90 right out of the box because, they don't want like the regular consumer to buy it and then have bad battery life. And then if you want to, if you're more of the enthusiast like we are, you'll go into the menus yourself and change the setting. I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think a scalable I wouldn't be surprised that it goes scalable, at least to, no, maybe not all the way down to 60 hertz, but like maybe a 90 to 120 hertz mode, which would be interesting to see, because then you really wouldn't notice too much, I think.
Yeah, and that begs the question, like, if OnePlus is giving you the option, why is well, again, this is all rumor and speculation, but why wouldn't Samsung do something similar? Because I'm sure a lot of people would like to use 90 hertz at least when the setting is on QHD on the S20.
I think that Samsung, is a much more mainstream product still to this day.
Right.
And I hate to say that, because I'm not saying Samsung isn't something early adopters and tech savvy folks like our audiences would get. I mean, I think the Samsung phones are always a rock solid recommendation for me.
For sure.
But I feel like they're more pragmatic about, they kind of learned, I think, a cue from Apple over the years of not having too many settings. Remember when TouchWiz had like a billion adjustability setting? Oh, you want what assistant would you like to use today?
Right. It's just too much.
We have our own crappy Bixby. We have a thing with Amazon. We have Google, of course. It was like a nightmare. People don't want that many choices. So I think that's kind of where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Somebody at XDA Forums will find a way to change that if it's not in the settings, or maybe the developer settings from Android will still have that option, right?
That's true. That's true.
And then you just turn on developer settings even on a Samsung phone, and boom, there you go. I don't know. It'll be interesting. Speaking of Samsung, I want to bullet point 3 things that are kind of interesting little rumors. There's some pricing leaks on the S20 that are eye-watering, of course. What do you take on that? I mean, they're rumors, so who knows?
Yeah, I mean, like, usually it's, let me get, I didn't see the prices, but I did see the headline that they did price it higher. I'm taking it with a grain of salt, because usually, the phones always are leaked with higher prices, and then they end up being, a couple $100 cheaper than what they were originally advertised. But if phones are going to start becoming expensive again, which I highly doubt they can push the prices anymore, then I think this year will be another year of great cheaper phones. Like, there's so many great cheap phones that are rumored to be coming out in 2020.
Yeah. I mean, I know that the Canadian market is very different. I used to live in Canada. I was in Vancouver for many years, and in Toronto for school. So I mean, it's just been a long time since I've lived there, so I don't really know like the ins and outs of the plans and the pricing. Even though, to be honest with you, I don't keep track too much on the U.S. side either, because I'm one of those people that's been married to T-Mobile for 20 years now. Right. And they haven't disappointed me. So. I think the thing about the U.S. market specifically, and maybe you can tell me about what it's like in Canada, but I think that the pricing, the reason we're seeing the prices go up on these flagships, or, as I said, like eye-watering pricing, is because people buy their phones subsidized. And if it's an extra $3 or $4 a month to get the bigger phone or whatever, or the 5G phone, they don't care, because that's the price of a coffee, right? Right. So I think there is that mentality of the people are really persistently buying phones through operators, and because of that, they can the manufacturers can charge $1,000 for a phone. And for those of us like you and me and our audience who prefer to own our terminals, own our devices, we buy them up front, and then obviously we're gonna gravitate towards that sweet spot of $500 to $600 where the OnePluses and the Oppos and the awesomeness lives, right?
Right, of course. I mean, Canada's the same idea. Like, you buy subsidized phones, but the problem is because our dollar's significantly higher. I mean, like inflated. Like a subsidized phone, let's say you wanted like an iPhone 11, is like $500 on contract, which is ridiculous, right?
Right.
So there's that. So like, a lot of people will still buy like an iPhone, but they won't buy the most expensive iPhone. They'll just buy like the cheapest iPhone, or they'll wait like 6 to 7 months and buy, get a deal, because usually Samsung products or LG products will come down in price, right?
Right. So what Max Weinbach, who works at XDA, who was my guest last week, is the one who got this information. He's been publishing a lot of really great S20 leaks. So S20 5G, 900 to 1,000 euros. S20 plus 5G, 1,050 to 1,100 euros, and S20 Ultra 5G, 1,300 euros.
Yeah, I definitely think they're inflated. I think it's going to be cheaper when it comes in.
I
That's
mean,
my gut
remember
feeling.
that you can translate that directly to US dollars roughly, because euro, even though as a euro is valued more, and it's the same probably for Canadian. So, I mean, this is still very high, but it's not eye-watering anymore if you don't do the direct translation. The point is that when we started talking about Samsung, I just had to mention that there's a couple of other rumors I want to get rid of real quick about Samsung, and one is a 40 megapixel selfie camera.
Yep.
On the Ultra, which could be interesting because it could be pixel bin, since the main camera, the other phones, I should say, their front camera is going to be 10 megapixel, the same setup as today, maybe with a faster lens.
Right.
So this would basically make pixel binning possible on the front camera on the Ultra, which I think, I'm all for having a front camera that doesn't suck. And
Right.
the poster child for that is the iPhone right now.
Of course.
Like every time I see, like when I saw that video John Morrison did with the front camera at 60 frames per second 4K,
Yeah.
I was like, holy crap, Apple, you are out of control. That is insanely good quality from a front-facing camera, right? I mean, it's not just the videos, it's the photos too. So
Yeah.
And then we have another quick bit of leak, since I kind of want to feel what you think about this one. It's again an S20 leak, is a physical back of the device leak that shows that basically the cosmetics of the camera pod.
Yeah, I saw it. I mean, it looks a little bit cleaner than the previous leak that Max
Yeah,
originally
definitely
sent
better.
out.
That looked kind of ugly, didn't it?
Yeah, it looked like it just came out of the mill factory. Nothing was done, and they chiseled it with a couple of pieces of rocks. Like this looks significantly better. I don't think it looks as clean as the ovens on the iPhone 11 or 11 Pro, but
Right.
I think it looks nice. I think it looks
I
nice.
think so. What I'm very interested about, and that's something Max and I didn't talk about last week, was that, so we talked about the resolution of the cameras, but we didn't really know the optical zoomness. Is there such? I'm making words up. The zoom level.
Yeah, optical zoom is
the
good.
actual
Yeah.
real physical optical zoom level, and it's supposedly reportedly 10 times on the 48, which explains the 108 better
Right.
now, because I feel that with that 108, you're going to be able to do 2 times digital zoom with very little loss, right? And because you know how, if you've used the P40 Pro, right, from Huawei,
Yeah, of course.
you know how having that 5 times optical, it's a big jump, right, from the 1 time to the to 5 time, and then below
for sure.
5 times you're using the main sensor, so you're cropping, really, right? You're running into some computational trickery to get the zoom to work between like 2 times and 3 times, and 2 times and 3 times is the sweet spot. That's where people want to zoom usually, right?
Right.
So if your optical is 10 times now, what do you do from 1x to 10x, right? Like, I think it's going to be a combination of multiple lenses combining and creating some computational madness to get us a decent 2, 3, and 5 times zoom. But with a 10 time optical in that 48, they can actually go up to 100 times hybrid, like 100 times
digital or whatever, yeah.
plus optical. It's insane. So this has
That's
got me
nuts.
excited, because even though I'm not sure that's the right solution for the average user,
Right.
I feel like, somebody had to do a periscope lens that was insane, and ta-da.
Yeah, like I think,
So-
I think it's cool to have. Like again, I think this is stuff that most people are not going to use on a daily basis. But I think just knowing that you have it, and let's say like for me, when I use digital zoom, it's usually to get a little bit closer to a board so I can see the text, or if I'm trying to like see a sign very far away and I can't make it out with my own eyes. Like in those situations, having that clean zoom is going to make a big difference.
For sure. So that wraps up our quick bullet pointing of the S20 leaks, because
Hold on,
there's
hold
so
on.
many leaks and rumors.
There's
you have one more?
leak. I got one more, which I feel
For sure.
is the most important.
Okay, go on.
Okay, S20, I just heard today that they're going to be bringing an AirDrop feature to it, and it's going to be
Ooh.
very similar to Apple's AirDrop. It's called Quick Share, I believe. One person's already installed on their device, but they couldn't get it working just because obviously it's not activated yet. But if they can mimic AirDrop on a Samsung device, that's going to be, I feel, for a lot of people, a very big deal.
That is a big deal, but it's proprietary, isn't it?
Most likely it will be.
And if you think about it, like Huawei have had that on their laptops and phones for a while, right? The little NFC sticker thing.
Yeah, but it only does like pictures and stuff. Like
Right.
this is going to be like a full AirDrop where you can move files,
Got it.
anything you want, which I think is like the next step.
Yeah, for sure. So can you send me the link to that after we're done? Because I'd love to
Yeah,
add
for
that
sure.
to the show
Definitely.
description, for sure. So that's a 4th Galaxy S20 rumor. I think AirDrop is a marvelous thing, and what really now is universal AirDrop on the Android universe. And right now, really technically, we have it with the Files app from Google.
Yep.
I don't know if you've used it. It probably is not as intuitive as Apple's, because Apple's baked in and it just works, right?
Exactly. And they did say they're going to update nearby sharing, which is Google's thing, to be much better soon. So hopefully that will
I
also
really
be
hope
another
so
option.
because we need something system wide on this. I feel like, it's like in the early days of like, all kinds of things were introduced by HTC and Samsung that were very valuable features, like screen recording and screen scrolling for having long screenshots. And I mean, the list goes on. And it wasn't until they made it into the Android ROMs, like into the Core OS, that I felt that they were important, right? That they really mattered. Because if it's proprietary, man. But I mean, a lot of Samsung users out there. So, hey.
Oh, tons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talked about the P40 Pro.
Right.
You made a video. I've been using a Mate 30 Pro and I'm delighted with it. I really wish that phone had made it with GMS to the West because, wow, once you put GMS on it, this thing is a killer. It is fast. The camera is incredible. The best ultra wide I've ever used in my life. Get this, Matt.
What?
40 megapixel with f/1.8 on the ultra wide.
Jeez,
You
that's
do
crazy.
the math.
That's
It's
nuts.
like the results are absolutely out of. You've never seen an ultra wide with this good, especially in low light. It's just killer.
Right.
So, none of us are getting this because it's really hard to buy this phone. And if you do buy it, you need to put GMS. The good news is this. The FX, what is it called? LZ Play hack that was briefly available online for like a day or two back when the Mate 30 Pro was released is still, you can still find it if you dig around on the internet.
Right.
And you don't need their servers to do it anymore. It's a local hack basically. It basically it's a backup restore type of hack.
Okay.
And it seems pretty secure and pretty safe. I haven't had any weird, bizarre side effects with it. And it restores GMS on any phone that Huawei has launched since the GMS debacle, right? The
Right.
ban. So if that includes the Mate 30 Pro, the Mate 30, the Honor 9X Pro, specifically the Pro, and specifically the Chinese market version, and then a couple of other lesser phones that I don't have my hands on. So, but my Honor 9X Pro works great with GMS with the LZ Play hack. So back to the P40 Pro, we all love our camera phones. I certainly do. That's been my bread and butter for a decade. So what's your take on the P40 Pro?
You know what? It's going to be another phone I wish we had, but we can't get. You know what I mean? Like Canada has Huawei here. We're allowed to sell their phones. The P30 Pro, you can go into a carrier and buy it, but they won't. I know for a fact they won't bring it here unless Google Play services are going to be on the device. And I think we're going to be in another situation based on what's happening where we're not going to have Google Play services. But as a device itself, I think it looks gorgeous. It's a beautiful phone. I don't think Huawei is going as crazy as they used to in terms of like updates and new features. But I do think it's a nice iterative update to the current P30 Pro that's on the market. They're still doing the same amount of cameras. They're obviously increasing the pixel count in the main sensor. They're going to be bringing in 10 times optical zoom instead of 5, which they have on the current one right now. I'm crossing my fingers. We're actually going to get a QHD display this time because that was probably my only complaint about the P30 Pro.
And the Mate 30 Pro is only 1080p. It's actually wider because it's got the waterfall display that's crazy, waterfalling all the way almost around. And so it's like 1160 pixels wide, but it's not a Quad HD like the Mate 20 Pro was prior. Yeah.
Right. And usually I don't care about not having QHD, but I think like if your smartphone is like 6.2 inches and bigger, it needs it. You know, like you have to have that option. And I notice it. Maybe I'm like delusional or just have really good eyes, but I can tell the difference between a full HD or QHD display on a display that's over 6 inches.
Right.
So I'm hoping that's there. I'm trying to
and dual hole punch front cameras, right?
Yeah, so they're adopting a similar style to what Samsung's doing. They're putting on the left-hand side instead of the right. So it looks like they're going to have some sort of ultra-wide camera and then like your regular wide camera. How many megapixels is it going to be? I don't know. Is it going to be crazy like the Oppo Find X2? We'll have to see. But I don't know. I also feel that's kind of like a step back, you know, because most manufacturers...
I feel like they're working with Leica, and they're pretty well invested on perfecting the RYYB color science, which, as you know, they don't have perfected yet because the colors are a little wonky on the P30, even after all the updates. And the Mate 30 Pro has the same issues with the main sensor. So I think that I would love them to see like kind of persist on this and really push it ahead in terms of computational and you know, image processing to get it to the point, because I'm a bit of a believer. I think that if done right, eventually that RYYB setup will pay off. But they might say throw in the towel and say it's too difficult and go back to a normal type of sensor. But I think it's clear to me they need to go with some pixel binning, which they're doing on the 40 right now.
Yep.
Because everybody's pixel binning and it really pays off, right?
So, for sure. Just having all that data, being able to get more light.
And 9x9 pixel binning is the next thing, right? Like, when you're looking at, and of course 16x16. So we're going to see more on that. Like for those of you who are just kind of tuning into this entire madness of 100 megapixel plus sensors, don't look at the megapixel count. Look at how they're binning the pixels, because really that's what the trick is. That's what makes the difference, right?
Yeah, because if they don't, 108 megapixels on a sensor
it's
that
going to
size,
be noisy as F.
Oh, it's going to be garbage. It's going to be
It's
going to fall apart. When it's going away from the center, you have to bin it. It's just, there's no other choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what else do we know about the P40 Pro as far as that you mentioned in your video?
So there's not much else we know. The leaks are still very, very soft. I mean, the only other thing we know is obviously it's going to come with the Kirin 990, which is in the Mate 30 Pro now.
Yeah, it's killer fast, man. Wow.
Oh, I've never used, to be quite honest, like I've been using Huawei phones since the P9, I believe, and I've never used a slow Huawei flagship. Like,
neither have I. And it's funny to me, like they're up there with OnePlus. Like you just like if you're using a Pixel daily, which I'm back to now because I had to return that McLaren OnePlus, it's like you basically feel like you're jumping from like a Camry into like a Porsche Boxster. It's like everything feels lighter on its feet and just more agile and just nicer,
Well, that's the thing, like Huawei makes these chips themselves, and it's just the same sort of idea as Apple. Like if you're able to create the chip and kind of use whatever operating system you have access to, you're able to do more than like the standard off-the-shelf parts that other vendors are used to using. And even though like the Kirin 990 or even the previous generation doesn't benchmark higher than a Snapdragon, it feels faster. Like it just feels faster, unless you're playing like hardcore games. Then I've heard situations where the other chips will prevail, but from day-to-day use, it's a solid chip. And and I think this year the big thing is they're going to tie in 5G with the device.
Of course, yeah. I mean, they do have a Mate 30 Pro 5G as well, and they have their own modem, but I don't think it does millimeter. It's only I believe it's only mid-low. I could be wrong because nobody really knows, because nobody has access to that technology, right? It's proprietary to China, their 5G right now.
Do you remember back in the day when the Snapdragon came out with the 810 and it was like the worst chip in the world? Like it doesn't matter what phone you bought. I think it was the Nexus 6P at the time. Yeah. And a bunch of other devices. The battery would die fast. It was poor performance because the chip was poorly made. The only phone at that time besides an iPhone that would run well was the P series. I remember and they weren't even popular back then.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Huawei does it like Apple. They're vertically integrated because they have their own Kirin chips, and they can really optimize the crap out of Android on it, right? And you really feel that. And OnePlus does it in a very different way. They're optimizing the crap out of what Qualcomm gives them, right?
Exactly.
So, but it's interesting to me that Samsung doesn't seem, they do some optimization, but doesn't seem to be quite there. And Google, certainly, you'd think that Google, of all people, would be the ones doing some seriously interesting optimization work, but they're not.
Yeah, and even Samsung makes their own chips, like the Exynos, and usually the Exynos to this day for the past few years is benchmarking and running worse than the Snapdragon counterpart.
Yeah, I think they just lost the plot. Like you have to start with a pretty clean and good chip to start with, right? The Kirins are very competitive, and Apple's chips are very competitive, obviously. So what I'm saying is, if you start with a very competitive chip, but then you vertically integrate like Apple and Huawei are, you can really optimize the living crap out of the whole pipeline, right? And that's what we're seeing. And I'm really impressed with what OnePlus can pull off, considering they don't own the pipeline fully. You know what I'm saying? Like,
oh, I agree.
Those are the folks that I want to shake hands as an ex-video game developer who was constantly worried about performance. So I think this is good stuff. I can tell you that the Mate 30 Pro, I've had it since actually just before CS, but I didn't have time to unbox it and use it until after CS. So I've had it for a couple of weeks now in my pocket, and it's just delightful. I really am. This makes me more angry about this whole Huawei ban and the whole politics around what's going on, because we're missing out on so much innovation and so much wonderful hardware with these products. And I'm going to continue writing about Huawei and the device and try to get my hands on the devices, because I feel like we need to continue. Like, regardless, like I know that eventually this political BS will go away and everything will be okay. But right now, what we can do, I feel, as media, as journalists, as influencers, as YouTube creators, podcasters, is really just continue the dialogue, the conversation, and keep telling people what we like and don't like about it.
Of course.
What I don't like about the Mate 30 Pro, well, it doesn't come with GMS out of the box. That's a big one. But you can add it. If you are out there looking and thinking and wanting to buy one, it's very easy right now to get.
How are you finding the
GMS
edges? Do you find them like easy to
So
use?
that's actually interesting. I don't like it. Like I don't like waterfall type display and rounded edges display, but I find that because it's so excessive here, it almost feels it's a different vibe than a OnePlus 7 Pro or 7T Pro
Right.
or like a Galaxy, because it's almost square. Like it's almost, the edges are almost like more abrupt. You know,
Right.
there's less of that roundness.
Okay.
And it makes the phone feel and look square. And it basically gives you that sci-fi look that you don't have edges at all.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
But then, you know, of course, you see the optical issues around the color changing at the edges. And so thankfully, the software doesn't seem to be affected by the edges.
Right.
Like everything just works fine. And the
Yeah.
double tap for volume works great. You get used to it very quickly, and it works. So it's nice because you now have a volume slider anywhere. Like you can double tap anywhere on either edge, and a volume slider appears.
And it works perfectly?
And then you can slide your finger up and down on that, and it's got the best haptics. You know how OnePlus has incredibly good haptics now?
Yep.
And Apple has always been like the haptic engine, like the king, queen, whatever haptics. And lately even Samsung's in the game, and you know, for the last 2 or 3 generation Pixels have been pretty great at haptics too. Imagine this multiplied by 10. Like you can literally feel like, it feels when I'm sliding the volume slider that I'm like, it's kind of like, you know, when you change the scrollers in an iPhone. It's like, like you can feel it in your fingers. Amazing.
That's awesome.
It's really, really tight. So, like, I know it's expensive hardware. You expect that from Mate 30 Pro, but things I don't like either. I don't know. There's a few things like having a notch. I mean, it has a full time of flight sensor array up there, basically what the Pixel 4 XL has, and it takes a lot less space, basically what the iPhone has, and it takes about the same space as the iPhone, maybe a little thinner. It's not as tall. So I like that the notch is small, but it's still enough of a notch that you kind of like feels a little antiquated, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I also love that Huawei takes like all their risks with the Mate series, because like that's more of their technical device. So they'll do like the crazy water drops and all that stuff, and then they'll refine it and create something maybe like a generation in terms of design behind with the P series, but at least it's kind of like clean and minimalistic compared to the Mate series. So you have best of both worlds.
Totally. And I like that they're, you know, taking risks, that their software is also getting better. This version, this Android 10 on this is the best EMUI I've used yet. It's not the notifications feel normal now.
Right. Right.
That's, you know, that's a big one that's been left over from for a while now on
Absolutely.
Huawei phones.
Like when I played with the Mate 30 Pro, I was still on 9 because it was last year. But my question to you is like, how is the skin? Is it like still very like iPhone-esque, kind of like, I don't know. I always found Huawei's themes
it feels more Android-y to me. Like it's still you know for sure you're in EMUI,
right?
But you don't want to throw the phone against the wall as much as you used to.
That's always a good thing.
Like it does feel and look better, and the experience is definitely less. There's less of these weird notifications popping up saying this app's running in the background. Like all that stuff seems to be much more toned down,
right?
And it just makes it for better quality of life overall so far. So I mean, overall, as I said, it's a pretty solid thing. I like the industrial design, the back, that round camera pod with the like weird glass accent around it.
Yep.
No, it's just lovely. I mean, you know, I think Huawei has been making some killer hardware for a while now, and this just continues that trend. So I'm really excited about the P40 and P40 Pro. Mm-hmm. And I will link your videos on the OnePlus 8 Pro and the P40 Pro, of course, in the show notes. So folks,
thank you so much.
Listening to this, go to the show notes, right? And just click on these links and watch the stuff. Yeah, they'll probably be the first couple of links. Let's see. Speaking of rumors, we have so much. So we talked about OnePlus. We talked about the Huawei stuff. Oh, there's another quick Huawei rumor, and it's that there is supposedly a new Mate X version. So you know the Mate X, the folding phone.
Yep.
That we can't get. It's called so this new version is like an improved Mate X. It's basically the same Mate X chassis, but improved with better processor and stuff. Probably a Kirin 990. It's called the Mate XS, with a small s. And that's supposed to come to China at some point, probably for MWC. Again, this is complete like forbidden fruit for us, right? Like,
Right.
you know, it's interesting to me. What's your take on this, Matt? Because you are a pretty high up there YouTube creator, and you're not in the US. I am surprised that none of the UK and Canadian heavy hitter YouTube creators haven't somehow bought a Mate S yet. X yet, and just reviewed it.
I think it's, you know what, I haven't looked into myself. Like, I know I can easily get a Mate 30 Pro if I wanted to buy, etc. But I find that their foldable phones are much tougher to get, and they're just really expensive. But
well, that's probably the problem, right? Like,
yeah.
Do you want to drop $2,500 on this thing to just do one video? Yeah.
And then like the video, let's say the video doesn't do well and you get like 5 views. It's like, oh, wait, I just wasted all that money.
You're not going to get 5 views, Matt. What are you talking about?
Hey, you never know with the algorithm. It has its days.
Damn the algorithm, right? I know.
Exactly. But I mean, yeah, you know, like I'm surprised that I haven't seen more reviews of it. I've seen like a couple of Middle Eastern reviewers do like a hands-on because they have access to it from reps in that region. But see, this is the thing, like the Canadian region, like the Canadian Huawei marketing team is actually based out of Europe. Like I think it's actually in Poland.
Oh.
So, which is weird. And they handle like, you know, UK.
Well, you know that technically our devices are handled by Grayling in the UK and the US right now.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay.
Which means we get nothing because they're like, we're not going to ship stuff to the US. Go away.
Yeah, why would they, right? And they're not going to ship it to Canada because they're not selling anything but the P30 Pro because it's the only device that has Google Play services. But I think, you know, like, look, they're doing the next logical step. They know Samsung's coming out with the Fold 2. They know it's going to be more refined. The screen is going to open and close a little bit easier. They're going to try to find ways to make the plastic a bit more durable. Is this something people should go out and buy right now? It's hard to say because, like, I love the way the Mate X or even the new XS is probably going to look, but I'm still not for a foldable display that folds outwards. I just feel like it's an easy...
Yeah, it's a bit weird, right?
Yeah, it's an easy target to break, you know? These screens are so thin and so sensitive that you need it to fold inwards. You just have to have it fold inwards right now. Yeah. And I know this is probably going to go off a tangent on this again, but I feel like right now the best way to do a foldable device is to do what Microsoft is doing and just use two screens like the Duo.
Yeah, for sure. Although we saw some good stuff at CS, and obviously I don't know if you played with the Razr. There's your segue. Haha. Thank you, Matt. I was going to say there's two big pieces of news this week. I mentioned that we had some news as well, and so the Razr, the Moto Razr, is finally coming for pre-order on the 26th of January here in the US, and then going to ship to customers on the 6th of February. So 26th of January, set your clocks. If you're buying a Razr, you plan to buy a Razr, that's the day you want to pre-order. 6th of January is when you'll get it. And, I'm only bringing that up because it's important for people to know, and that's really all I have to say. But this ties into what you were saying. The Microsoft approach is to not have a fold at all in the display. Have two displays that are very close and have very little bezel. And I think that what Moto did with the Razr and what we saw Lenovo do with that folding 13-inch tablet laptop thing.
Yep, X1 Fold.
At CES. Yeah, thank you. It shows that it can be done really well. But the Lenovo doesn't close fully, but it has that keyboard that flips in it. But the Razr shows you how you can make it fold perfectly, right? And I don't know if you played with the Razr at all, but it's insane in terms of like how they make that happen.
Yeah, I've played with the X1 Fold, but I haven't played with the Razr. But I think like the Razr's probably, if you're going to use that type of display, I think it's like the best way to do it right now.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
And, the fact that they're banking on my generation, or our generation.
Our generation.
Yeah, our generation in terms of nostalgia. Like, how can you, even though, the specs are not the greatest, how can you not get excited for it? You know what I mean? Like,
I tell you, I went into this thing in LA, this hands-on experience, this briefing, because there was both a briefing and a party kind of like launch event, which, as you know from a lot of YouTube creators, was a total mess because it was so dark you couldn't film.
I heard.
So I actually got myself into the press briefing or whatever, the media briefing, and that was daytime, so it was okay. The lighting, there was some decent lighting, but I tell you, I went in there going, I don't know, let's see. I like Moto's. I like what Moto's been doing, but I just feel that they're always a little off, like kind of like Google, off in their own universe, and not necessarily the right universe. You know what I'm saying? Not necessarily in tune with things. And I played with that thing, and I was like, wow, okay, Moto, You got me now. Like it's not so much what they did, Matt. It's if you get a chance to play with it,
I will.
You will feel like the mechanicals, the tactility of it is insanely well done. You have never touched a folding device with this, like what I mean by that, a folding display device that feels this refined and this robust. Like you can literally feel like you can drop kick this thing and nothing bad's going to happen.
Interesting. That's very interesting.
And I think the way the hinge folds, where it has a teardrop that kind of like hides itself inside, and how the actual edge of the display slides in and out of the, what's it called, the chin, right? The actual display slides in and out as you open it and close it.
Yeah. See, now I'm excited. You have me excited. I'm hyped.
No, the specs are meh, and like it's too late to the market and all that, but nostalgia will sell, especially on Verizon in the US, especially if you think people are going to spend $1,500 on a phone, you're sadly mistaken. They're just going to get a plan on with it, and it's going to be like whatever it is, $50 a month or whatever, and it's going to be, they don't care, right?
This is a status device. People are going to buy this for status. That's what it is.
And you know that influencers are going to love that thing on Instagram and stuff. So,
oh yeah, for sure.
So that's kind of where I think the Razr is insignificant. Of course, then there's a Z Flip from Samsung. That'll probably, in terms of specs, steal the holy grail of the attention. But that's not coming until after. Right. So this Mate XS is interesting to me simply because, you know, it's kind of another one of these phones that we don't know anything about, simply because nobody's gotten their hands on it, and we probably won't get our hands on it.
Yeah, so, I agree.
But speaking of Huawei, the last bit of rumor, I didn't have it in the notes, but I think it's actually interesting. I'm just going to say it. There's rumors that Huawei will bring a $150 5G phone to market by the end of 2020 or early 2021. Yeah.
That is insane.
Now, that's not going to apply to us probably, but it's for China. And if you think about it, that tells you how way ahead they are. I mean, I'm not saying they're more ahead than Qualcomm, but they're definitely more ahead than a lot of people think of when they think of Huawei.
Well, I mean, look at their network infrastructure. I mean, that's why people want to buy their equipment, because of its price to performance ratio. Like they're ahead of Ericsson. They're ahead of every other manufacturer who's implementing 5G network infrastructure. And it seems like they're doing the same thing with mobile chips as well. So I'm not surprised that they're going to bring a cheaper, more affordable 5G variant, especially to their market.
And speaking of cheaper, more affordable, Qualcomm announced a bunch of chips this week.
Yes, they did.
That are 4G chips, so LTE chips. And what's interesting to me about them is that it seems like Qualcomm's reacting to MediaTek eating their lunch in that kind of low to mid range by coming out with very competitively priced chips to kind of like fight back, as it were. The one that's got me really excited is the 720G. The 7 series is kind of like this. You don't see it on Western phones much, and it's very prevalent on the Chinese kind of super high-end mid-range, like what I call affordable premium, right?
You want to know why, though? It's because of the G for gaming.
Yeah. Well, of course, the G4 gaming is actually the interesting part of that, right? So the 3 chips they announced was the 460, who cares? The 662 could be interesting because the 600 series is still used in some pretty significant phones like the G series from Moto, which we should see some new G series probably at MWC at this point. Right. And then the as you know, the Pixel 3a is a 600 series chip. I think this year it might switch to that 720G, and maybe we'll see a Pixel A with 5G with a 765G chip. And that's another rumor.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, you're right. There is a rumor that the Pixel 4a, I think that rumor is BS, because there's no way they're going to release 5G on their budget lineup before they do on their high end. I think if anything, like if there's going to be a 5G announcement when they announce the 4a, they might just announce like a Pixel 4 XL with a 5G chip or something. I don't know. I just can't see it.
I don't know. I think this. I agree. My gut is torn, because part of me says you're absolutely dead on, and part of me says we are underestimating how quickly 5G is going to roll out in the US this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if they can hit a certain price point. Like, there's also rumors that the Pixel 4 is going up in price a little bit by about $50. At that point, it's competing with the OnePlus, right? So we're at that point. Honestly, you're going to say, well, it doesn't have triple cameras, blah blah blah. I'm like, but think in Google Think, right? In Google Think, it's the software that matters. Now, I personally, having seen the leaks and rumors on the Pixel 4a so far, the visual leaks and rumors, I love the industrial design way more than what I have with my Pixel 4. And I'm seeing way more than Google's done with anything recently. Yeah. I love that there's an equal bezel all the way around. It reminds me a lot of the iPhone 11, which it would presumably compete with, right? And at that point, it can be $700 almost.
For sure.
If it has hear me out. If it has a 765G in there with 5G and costs, say, $600, right? And looks as it does. Now, it's going to miss on the camera side in terms of it doesn't have an ultra wide and a tele, but that might not be a deal breaker for some people. To get the Google experience and get a 5G phone with that Google experience might be where they go. And they might be wrong and they might sell none of them, but they don't really sell any even right now anyway, so it doesn't matter, right?
Well, I mean, their Pixel 3a outsold their Pixel 3 at one point, right? So, I mean, like, for example, my dad has a Pixel 3a and he absolutely loves
Everybody
the phone.
has a Pixel 3a, loves it.
Exactly.
And I think the 4a, I honestly am excited about the 4a because it looks amazing and I think it's going to be a killer bestseller, especially if they have two versions. One with 4G running on a 7 series, like 730 or 720, this new chip, and then have a more expensive 5G. Then they hit both sides of the market because remember, Google's trying to get in bed with the US carriers.
Right.
And this year is all going to be about 5G.
5G.
You can't have a phone without 5G. So maybe the Pixel 4a will have a variant with 5G.
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, like, if they're going to do it like you said. They're going to have two variants of it. Like a cheaper one for people who don't care about it, and then the more expensive one.
Correct. And maybe it's two sizes. The small one is cheap and has 4G, and the big one is more expensive and has 5G and has all the antennas. And I don't think we're talking about millimeter here. We're just talking about sub-6, like mid-band, low-band. Think about this. That phone on Timo, right, would be a killer phone. Subsidized?
Oh, yeah.
Pixel 4a was 765G or 765 non-G even, with the 5G built in, with that industrial design, for an aggressive price point with a big marketing campaign on Timo saying, we have 5G everywhere already. Here's your phone for 5G. Here's the first affordable 5G phone. Like, I could see that totally taking off.
Absolutely, especially if they're gonna market it as like an exclusive to a specific brand, specific carrier.
For a while. Yeah, exactly. And of course, we know OnePlus has a big deal, a big agreement with T-Mobile.
Yeah.
So we're going to probably see like a OnePlus 8 Lite with a Dimensity chip, right?
Well, that speaks the question. Do you think a lot of people are going to aim towards the Lite, or they're still going to go for like the 8 Pro? Because
I think in North America, OnePlus is going to prioritize the higher end phones.
For sure.
Because remember, if they're going to sell subsidized to carriers, people don't look at the final price. They look at the subsidy, right? So that's why it's beneficial for OnePlus to aim on selling like a $700, $800, $900 phone because they can get, their margin back better, right? Than when they sell Unlock where they have to really be competitive because Unlocked is kind of like, very tight in terms of price. So I think for some markets, for OnePlus, like the 8 Lite will be really important for India and other places. And maybe they will bring it unlocked to the US. And then for carriers, you'll want the 8 or 8 Pro because you're going to get it subsidized and you're going to get the goodness and it's going to be considered a flagship competitor,
I'm thinking they don't even bring the 8 Lite to North America at all. Maybe they just release it in India and other countries.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite possible. I'm just daydreaming here.
This is all speculation. Total speculation.
I'm wishful thinking here. So look, I think this is super exciting. And again, this is a very exciting time. Like the last 2 weeks, the rumor mill has been, I don't think I've seen this many rumors drop before MWC with this quantity and frequency. It's kind of crazy right now.
MWC is going to be interesting. Do you think we're going to get anything out of LG? Does anybody even care?
So I'm hearing rumors, and I just want to say this, like, I have heard that potentially we'll see an LG phone with a MediaTek Dimensity chip.
Interesting.
Because trying to hit price point and have 5G for US networks.
Right.
Take that with a grain of salt. This seems odd because LG uses Qualcomm all the time. So, but maybe to hit that price point,
That's true.
In some markets, I'm not sure this would apply to the U.S., of course. So, but we'll find out in MWC. Speaking of other phones that are interesting and rumors, we have more. We talked briefly about the Oppo Find 2, and so there are leaks on the Oppo Find 2. Find X2, which would be their flagship, which would be $1,000 phone, which might have an under-display camera. But now they're talking about dual 44-megapixel selfie cameras, which would mean it would probably be a hole punch because I don't see them putting two under-display cameras on a phone.
Not that big.
But, this is a rumor from I saw on Pocket Now, and basically dual 44, not sure what that means, but obviously quad buyer pixel binning here. But maybe a tele, or I actually think more likely an ultra wide and a regular of pretty high quality. And that would be interesting.
That'll be interesting. I think it'd be more interesting to see what they do with. I mean, besides like good pictures, it'd be more interesting to see what they can do with the camera. Like, can they pull off some nice 60 frames per second in video? Can they, get some of those other features that they couldn't do before? Because like as of right now, like most people, front facing camera is important, but like having the best or most megapixels has never been like a priority to make it amazing.
Totally, but at the same time, in China, where Oppo is kind of pretty high, a pretty big player. Selfies are much bigger, I think, than even North America. So maybe there's some truth to this. But I'm more leaning towards an under-display camera right now. I just think that it's possible there's an Oppo phone coming out with dual front 44 megapixel cameras, but it might be like the Reno 3 the Reno 3's been announced. But it might be like another Reno. Because, they seem to be coming out with a new Reno series every 6 months. So maybe this is the next version of the Reno or something. But I find to me like the Find X series has always been kind of like the prototype come to life, right? The concept phone come to life, and as such, I'm thinking more under display. But that's just me because I'm biased because I want to see this under display stuff, just because I think it's cool. Speaking of other Chinese companies, Xiaomi has had a brand called Pocophone that made one phone, the F1, which was an incredibly value for the money. It had a Snapdragon 845 at the time for like $300. It was insane. But then they've kind of watered that down a bit because they come out with the Redmi phones, so like the K20 Pro last year, which was a $350 phone with a Snapdragon 855, which was amazing, had triple cameras in the back. So Pocophone kind of seemed to disappear off the planet, but now we're hearing that Xiaomi spun off the Pocophone company, like they basically are doing with some other brands. And so this is now going to be more independent. And simultaneously with that, we're seeing a whole bunch of Pocophone F2 rumors. So the successor to the F1, right?
I mean, the Poco F1 was like, when it came out, I remember it like shocked the world.
We were,
wow. Oh, I was just like, this is insane for the price. I was able to get one like, on launch day, and people were just going crazy for it, But I think, like you said, the tough part right now is they have these other sub brands like Redmi and all that. What's gonna make this phone
and CC? Remember they have the CC9.
That's right. What's gonna make it so special this time? Because you've already done it. You have these other brands that are already doing it. Are we gonna see like a Snapdragon 865 under $300? Because if you do that, then I kind of see.
Oh yeah.
See
if we do that, if they do that, I think they might, this is
they have to.
It's like, Realme, the Oppo brand has been taken India by storm. And maybe that's what they're trying to do with Poco. They're trying to position it as the Realme competitor in India, But anyway, this is, the F2 is rumored, but we don't know anything. But the Pocophone becoming its own company thing is news. So take it or leave it, folks. That's basically kind of, I think, the rundown of rumors for this week, which is like, wow, we went crazy. Look at us, Matt. We did it. I think we did. We skipped the iPhone rumors. I don't want to get into that. There is a bunch of iPhone 12 rumors, but I want to keep that for another show. Okay. So that was quite the race. I think we did okay, though. Right?
I think we did good. I think we covered everything. Hopefully we answered people's questions and put some thoughts into their head. It's going to be an interesting year nonetheless, So
I think it's going to be super excited for it. I'm super stoked for MWC. I'm going to be there. I just got my press pass in case you saw the tweets that
I did.
They declined me originally.
Yes.
We had a little chat.
Good.
They were very accommodating after that, thankfully. I hope that I have a feeling this is going to be a repeated pattern in the future. Apparently, podcasting is not accepted as a media credential these days.
That's ridiculous. Podcasting.
That is a new decision they made, and my YouTube channel doesn't have the numbers yours does, so it's hard for me to apply as a YouTube creator, and doesn't have the requirements of their numbers. I can try as a blogger because technically every podcast is a blog post, right? I do have mobiletechpodcast.com. So I don't know. I'll see what happens next year, but at least for this year I'm in. And what a struggle this is every year with the MWC folks. I wish it was easier. If you're listening, GSMA, we love you, but can you,
smarten up?
I know that they look at people on an individual basis, but I think they should have a record in their system that
you're like a veteran,
right?
Like
almost every year.
I remember reading your articles on Engadget back in the day. Like I remember your work.
And even now I still write sometimes for like Geekspin and Android Police. It's like, I gave them all that information and I gave them my numbers. They had no issues with my numbers. They're very happy. I get a pretty reasonable download number a month, which is really important for a podcast because it's hard.
Of course.
So, but it's just that they, in the same way as with CS, like you saw what happened with Quinn, right?
Yeah.
Like they refused
crazy.
him, and he's like, because I'm not at 1 million subs or whatever it was. So then they changed their tune. It's like, it's ridiculous. Like,
I know. They're so out of tune. They're just really out of touch.
Out of tune. Yeah. So listen, I think we're good. If you wanted to tell the audience right now where they can find you online, your social media handles, of course, your channel, your blog, whatever else you want to pitch would be great right now.
Awesome. So you can find me at MatthewMoniz.com or on Twitter at Matt Moniz, or if you search for me, you can find me on YouTube at Matthew Moniz. And I just want to say thank you so much, Miriam, for having me on. This has been absolutely awesome.
Well, thanks for being here. I mean, like, it's funny because, we saw each other at the OnePlus party, and I was like, Matt, I keep forgetting to invite you. So I made a note finally, and here we are 2 weeks later. I'm so glad you could make it. It's always a pleasure hanging out with you and getting to know you better every time. Do you have an Instagram that people should be checking out as well?
Yes. So it's Matt Moniz123.
Okay, so almost like your Twitter, but you have to add 1, 2, 3.
I didn't get the name. I wasn't lucky.
Yeah, I know. This is my problem with YouTube. My channel never got Tanker LT and KGRL, which is so I have this crazy handle, and right now they won't let me change it. It's really annoying. I want to change it to just Mobile Tech Podcast, but I need to talk to somebody at YouTube about that because I just finally went to a branded channel.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know where to find me, folks. I'm at Tankerl on Twitter and Instagram. That's TNKGRL, like the comic book character, but just drop the vowels. You'll find the commentary on the podcast happens on Twitter. So if you want to comment, because you can't really do that on podcast apps, just like ping me on Twitter, say, I disagree, I don't like, let's talk. And then my Instagram is where you'll find pretty pictures of phones and pretty pictures taken with phones. That's basically what it's for. And then finally, the YouTube channel, go to youtube.com and type Mobile Tech Podcast. You'll get there. There's also a second channel we just started called Mobile Tech More. We being my producer and I, they're going to be making videos on there of like health gear and home automation gear and stuff. So we're starting that very slowly, Mobile Tech More. And then the podcast itself lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. If you're old school, you have RSS, you can subscribe there. But of course, if you're new school, Apple Podcast is your friend, so is Google Podcast, Pocket Cast, and of course Spotify. You can listen to the podcast on Spotify all day long. Just look for Mobile Tech Podcast or TNKGRL, my Twitter handle, and you'll find me there and me and my guests. And so the last thing I want to say before we part is thank our sponsor, Audible.com. They're pretty awesome. They've been with us since day one. And if you prefer listening to your books rather than reading your books, or maybe you have a reason you're doing a road trip for the whole day or something, and you're having to drive, this is a great way to get your books on. If you're a bookworm and you like books, you have to have an Audible account. So here's the deal. You get a 30-day free trial where you get to keep the books at the end if you sign up through the link in the show notes. And doing so, even if you don't stay at the end, you support the podcast. So it's a big deal for us, for me. If you're not Audible customer yet, please consider it. audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. So click through, support the podcast, and get your Audible on. You'll love it. I like the fact that they have a lot of books read by the authors. So that's my big thing about them. Have you used Audible?
Yes, I have. It's such a great experience just being able to listen to some of my favorite authors actually narrate the book. And I think that's like the biggest problem. Like listening to a story and then having someone else say it is not always the greatest. But when you can find books on Audible that have the actual author speaking to you, it just makes listening to that story so much better.
I know. It's so kick-ass. I'm right now waiting for the Star Wars book edition of the latest movie. Like last time they did that, they turned the middle movie of the three and 2 years ago into a 21-hour epic.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was quite
That's
something.
Crazy.
And so we were going to South by Southwest in our camper van that year, and we listened to it on the drive. We took a few days to drive out to Austin from the Bay Area. It was awesome. Yeah. So, Audible, thanks for being our longtime sponsor. Really appreciate you guys. And I want to say thank you to you, Matt, for being my guest.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been fun.
I was amazed that we both had the discipline to get through all the topics.
That's a good thing. We did it.
Yeah.
Be proud of ourselves.
Cool. Well, I'll have you on again at some point, and obviously we'll have a show next week. So stay tuned for that, folks. And until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.